time for us to talk news for the past few days. And we'll begin with managers, because Oxford United are set to appoint Gary Rowett as their new boss. It follows the sacking of Des Buckingham over the weekend. The BBC say other candidates were considered, but Oxford made him their number one target. He's back, Justin. You can't keep old Gazza Rowett down, can you? And I tell you what, Justin, I think this is a great appointment.
Yeah, I really like the appointment. I know what you were saying the other day, in that, it's hard to judge a sacking until you know how good the next manager is going to be. And I think in terms of lining up Gary Rowett, Oxford have given themselves the best chance to make the Des Buckingham sacking look like a good decision. I still don't think it should have been done. It probably still should have been afforded time, but bringing Garrett Rowett in affords you the best chance of staying a championship club. He's probably the best option, and maybe Oxford might be punching a little bit, because I genuinely would have thought Gary Rowett would have got a job, in and around the mid-table, pushing up for the playoffs. But fair play to Oxford, and there are so many positives. There's so many more positives to Gary Rowett than there are negatives. There'll be a lot of supporters of teams that he has managed who will say he's boring. Yes, he's boring, but it's results driven, and that's important. That's important in football, especially if your resources aren't as big as other clubs. He's a good guy. He's a good communicator. He's a good tactician. He's very good at recognizing strengths of his teams, and playing to them, and that goes a long, long way at this level. Really does.
Yeah, and going off what you were saying is what I was saying at the weekend, that you can't properly judge the Buckingham sack until you see who they get in. I agree with you. I think he deserved more than 20 games in a season to prove his worth. But straight up, I'll tell you right now, Gary Rowett is an upgrade on Des Buckingham. Based off what we've seen of Buckingham this season, he just is. Does this mean Oxford are staying up? No. But for me, it does mean their chances of staying up significantly improve, because Gary Rowett has a proven track record. It's probably the best track record Oxford could have realistically got. He's done, at the bare minimum, a good job at every club he's been at, bar Stoke. And that includes Birmingham last season, by the way. He did better there than most people probably think, because yes, they went down under him, but he took a team who had lost 8 from 11, and in their last 7 games, they won 3, lost 2. If the season were a bit longer, he probably would have kept Birmingham up last season. So that's why he's the best man for this season. If Oxford do go down, maybe I'd have preferred Des Buckingham in the long term because of who he is, Oxford fan, all that. But the goal this season is to simply stay up, and I think Rowett is the ideal man for that.
Yeah, completely agree. It's in a variety of senses. I completely forgot about the Birmingham City spell last season, because the rhetoric I had is, he had Birmingham in his first spell on the edge of the playoffs. He had Derby in the playoffs. I know you said Stoke was a bad spell, but actually they probably looked the most convincing in his spell. I know it was only 6 months. They looked the most convincing since coming down from the Prep with him in charge. He's the one that's got them closest to the playoffs, albeit it was a handful of points. I think it was three or four points off the playoffs. Might have been 6.
It's a low bar, Justin, at Stoke.
It is a low bar, but yes, a lot of money was spent. Blah blah blah. There's a lot of caveats to that, and of course, Millwall were on the edge of being a playoff team as well with him in charge. And then even in his second spell, the damage was done before Rowett came in. That's really important to point out. But he steadied a ship that was sinking very, very fast because of poor decision making at the top. Even Burton Albion, his first spell in as a manager, he had them punching way above their weight. Millwall punching above the weight. Birmingham in his first spell punching above the weight. He's a manager who gets a lot more out of a team than what is expected. And I think that's important when your resources, like Oxford are very, very small compared to a lot of teams around you. He will get teams overperforming. He will do that. And I think with Stoke, if he had time at Stoke, he would have delivered success for them. Again, by and large, doesn't matter now, but he is a manager that does get success. He is. It's as simple as that. And no matter how boring you think it is, he delivers. He really does.
Yeah, he does. And what you basically said there, Justin, is the big thing here, that he's got a track record of getting the most out of the tools that he's dealt with, because Oxford do have one of the poorest set of resources in the Championship. We all know that. And Des Buckingham was struggling to, keep them up, essentially, wasn't he? Because they were on a one-way track to going down from looking at how they were doing. Whereas Gary Rowett has been in charge of clubs in the past who don't have the greatest set of resources and gets them playing above their level. And that's what he's probably, hopefully, going to be doing at Oxford again, because he's done it on so many occasions that you'd expect him to do that. So it makes a lot of sense, this appointment. And I know Oxford fans will still be disappointed about losing Des Buckingham, but I mean, from what I've seen, many Oxford fans seem pretty chuffed about this appointment, because they probably think, no disrespect to them, they probably think they've done well to get him. And it was interesting reading the statement from the Oxford chairman on Monday night, I believe it was, in response to the Buckingham sacking, because it was a very, it wasn't met with widespread approval from Oxford fans. I think that's fair to say. And they essentially put out the statement, which summarised what we said at the weekend, that Oxford see this as a great chance for them to cement themselves as being a championship side. Justin, Rowett goes a long way to making that happen, I think. I'm not, as we say, don't necessarily know for sure that he's going to keep them up, but their chances of doing so do significantly improve with him in charge.
Yeah, they do. And again, it's good that that communication is coming from the club as well, coming from the chairman. Post, sacking a very popular figure is very, very important, and a lot of clubs can learn from that. I think another real big positive of Gary Rowett is Oxford over the years has been built, squad-wise, managerial-wise, to play this, play through the thirds, pass through the thirds, be a little bit more fluid. And obviously they found success with it to an extent in League One. They'd missed out on the playoffs, a handful of times. They lost in the playoff final to Wickham, etc., before eventually going up last season. Took them a fair old time to get to the Championship. And obviously they're finding it wasn't a success in the Championship. Gary Rowett's got experience of taking a team who have one set of principles, i.e. playing through the thirds, changing them into a bit more pragmatism, getting success with it. Because we had that at Derby. He took over from Steve McLaren, from Paul. That team was built to play passing-based football, and he turned it into pragmatism, and he got the best out of Matai Vidra, etc. As I say, he plays to a squad strengths, and I think he gets them organised, he gets them structured, he gets them difficult to break down, and that's what Oxford need at the moment. And if you're going to be a success in the Championship, that's also a very big principle you need to adopt.
Let's stick with manager news, Justin. And Russell Martin's sacking at Southampton has led to two Championship managers being heavily linked with the job. Sheffield Wednesday boss Danny Rule is the bookies' favourite. He's reportedly under consideration and used to be the assistant there to Ralph Hasenhüttl. The other manager is West Brom's Carlos Corberán. Southampton are reportedly weighing up an approach for him. Other managers are in the running, but those two appear to be major contenders. Justin, what do you think?
They tick the same boxes, don't they? Carlos Corberán and Danny Rule, in that they're both, first and foremost, not tactically naive like Russell Martin is. They are very fluid. They will play to a team's strengths, but they will, slowly transition their style of football, and they won't allow their teams to continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. I mentioned that they're both young, they're both up and coming, they're both in difficult circumstances at their respective clubs as well. Carlos Corberán and Danny Rule. Carlos Corberán, we know at West Brom has got a budget constraint. There's a transfer embargo at the moment, and maybe he might be feeling that he's taken them as far as he can with the squad that he's got. Results certainly suggest that's the case. And with Danny Rule, Sheffield Wednesday is a bit of a powder keg. It's just whether or not the powder keg is going to be lit at any point with Chansiri as the owner. Now, I do think if Southampton were to activate Danny Rule's clause in his contract and paid was it $5 million? It's excessive $5 million, wasn't it?
Well, that's what I was going to say, Justin, that the interesting thing here is whether Southampton are willing to buy out the buyout clause essentially for these two managers, because the latest report I've seen is that Southampton want Carlos Corberán, but they'd have to pay £2 million in compensation, which Southampton consider too dear. And if that is the case, that would almost certainly rule out Danny Rule, because the reports in the summer that we saw were any club wanting him, after he was getting linked with various other clubs, any club wanting him would have to pay Sheffield Wednesday £5 million in compensation just to get him, and a further £5 million to bring his staff along as well. So that's something you've definitely got to take into consideration here, isn't it?
It is, but I think both managers are worth it. I think that's the crazy thing.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because why are clubs happy to fork out millions of pounds for players, but when it comes to a manager, they don't want to? apparently. It's weird, isn't it?
It is weird, but it's easy to sack a manager when results aren't going well. You can't sack players because they represent a much more financially valuable asset, aren't they? Players are. It's bonkers because managers
if you spend £30 million on a player and they end up being shite, then you're stuck with a £30 million player who you're trying to shift off your wages and probably have to take a massive cut on. Whereas a manager, if you think the manager is the right man for the club, then that changes everything, doesn't it?
It does, because a manager can develop a club. There's a very sound logic to it, but that's a side of football that isn't logical at all. Because there are various reasons why a manager might not be a success. It might not be down to the quality of the manager. It might be the club's a nightmare. It might be the squad needs building up and isn't quite ready, etc. There are so many things that impact the manager's development that do not impact a player's development. But I do agree, and I do think that both of these managers are worth their fees, but it's quite strange or interesting that Southampton might be unwilling to pay. There might be an FFP thing with Southampton. We know that's impacted them in the past.
Yeah.
So that might be the case. And again, paying £5 million for Danny Rowett and a further £5 million for his coaching staff financially, if they need to sack him at the end of the season because they set the lowest points record tally in Premier League history, it's just not gone like anyone would have expected, then it's going to cost them even more money to sack him. And then they're in an Eric Ten Hag situation where they're probably running up a £20 million bill just for hiring a sacking manager. So, financially, it doesn't make sense. But I do think if Southampton were to activate Carlos Corberán's clause, I think Carlos Corberán would definitely go. I think that's a situation at West Brom now where the club's just
that's what I was going to bring the next question on to, Justin, but you're covering a lot of bases here. That's what I wanted to talk about, because it's all hypothetical, talking about the compensation that Southampton would have to pay for these managers. The question is, would they want to go? Because I fully agree with you. Both are two of the most talented managers in the division. Both, I think, are big futures in the game. Southampton, admittedly, isn't the most appealing of jobs because they're almost certainly going to go down this season, no matter who they bring in. But, of course, as you alluded to, West Brom have had their financial issues, which Carlos Corberán has admitted he's found difficult. And then Danny Rowett is obviously at Sheffield Wednesday, where the owner is an absolute madman. So if you were to put yourself in the shoes of either of these two, would you be looking at Southampton and thinking, if that move happens, I would like to leave?
I don't think it's I would like to leave. I think it would be this is a much better opportunity than the one I've got at the moment because of several issues. Carlos Corberán and West Brom is a very unique one in that I think timing-wise it's just working against Carlos Corberán. I think if he was to take over this summer, for example, ride the crest of it or ride the storm of the transfer embargo this season, I think he'll get them promoted within a season or two. But I think he's been there a long time. He's gone through a lot with the club, a lot of uncertainty. The squad's not being able or had it what's needed in terms of investment into it. A regeneration of old players that are growing stale, if you like. So he's had to work with that, and I think Southampton represents, for both managers actually, a very good young squad that needs developing, that will develop. I think recruitment-wise, they bought a lot of players who are okay now, but will get better in the future, which is probably why Russell Martin has not been a success. And I think, and again with Danny Rowett, I think his head would be turned because, again, he's in a situation at Sheffield Wednesday where I don't think he'll quite realise his potential because, they've got no money to spend. They've got no money to spend for a variety of issues, or a variety of things. One of them being, the owner doesn't want to invest a hell of a lot more. He's made that very clear. He wants to sell the club if the right offer comes in, etc. So both of these managers are under owners with difficult circumstances, and they walk into Southampton where it's not quite that. It's actually nice. They won't have these burdens, if you like.
Yeah, I think anyone who is saying, why would they want to leave, has to take that into account, but has also got to think about it like this, right? Southampton are probably, almost certainly going to be in the same division as West Brom and Sheffield Wednesday next season, aren't they? Mm-hmm. And if we fast forward to August next year, then they'll be in a prime position to get Southampton fighting for promotion and hopefully back into the Premier League in 2 seasons' time. The only thing that would possibly trip that theory up, would be if Corberán or Rule or whoever were to lose their job with Southampton this season. But I don't think we'll see a situation like Nathan Jones at Southampton a couple of seasons ago, because Nathan Jones, the Southampton fans never took to him, and his comments during press conferences, I think, raised a few eyebrows. So even if Carlos Corberán or Danny Rule were to go in at Southampton and were to carry on losing as much as they were previously, I would think that they would be willing, the Southampton hierarchy would give them more time and have more patience and say, right, I still think these guys are the people to lead us when we're back in the Championship. Do you know what I mean, Justin?
Yeah, I do. And I think another thing you've got to consider is both Danny Rule and Carlos Corberán are very good communicators, to a wider stakeholder, if you like. They can get everyone on board, the players, the owners, and the fans. That's a big thing. Nathan Jones said some weird shit, didn't go his way for that. Russell Martin was very easily offended about his style of play. Don't bring up plan B around Russell Martin. He will come at you. And I think that spikiness, essentially just alienates supporters, because everyone can see you're making the same mistakes. Can we change things? No, you're doing it this way. You stubborn man. Stop doing that. Danny Rule and Carlos Corberán aren't that.
If this is the first time you've ever listened to the Second Tier podcast, you may have guessed that Justin Peach isn't a massive Russell Martin fan.
Yes, and if you want more insight, please subscribe to our Patreon, where I let loose on our previous on last weekend's episode. So
in Zamora time, for anyone who is wondering where.
So I think that goes a long way as well. Both Carlos Corberán and Danny Rule are very pragmatic in their approaches, and that really will get fans on board.
Yeah. I think that's completely fair, Justin. So it'll be very interesting to see if anything does happen. But as we say, there are other managers who are said to be in the running, but it does appear these two are major contenders. So a nervy couple of weeks, or a nervy next few days or whatever, for the fans of West Brom and Sheffield Wednesday when it comes to keeping hold of those two managers. Let's take a quick break, Justin. After that, we'll talk about Sheffield United's takeover, which seems to be finally happening, and Luton Town's new stadium. Bloody hell, that's been taking ages. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. We're here doing a news roundup of everything cracking off across the Championship from the past few days. But before we get on to a few more bits, Justin, 5 in 10. Name 5 managers who have managed in the Championship before, but not this season.
5 Championship. Neil Warnock, Kevin Blackwell, Valérien Ismaël.
I'm
Steve
afraid
Cotterill.
Time is up, Justin.
Philip Montagnier.
You see, your tactic of Philip Montagnier, bloody hell. Your tactic of rereading the question out may work when you do the Craig Bryson pub quiz, but when you've only got 10 seconds to really,
I waste time.
Eats up time.
It does.
So unfortunately, Justin Peach has fallen foul to 5 in 10 once again. He's not had a great record when it comes to this, but he did get 5 last week when it was naming African countries, bizarrely. But when it comes to anything involving the Championship, he instantly becomes stuck. Yeah, it's the pressure. The pressure is very difficult when it comes to this. Anyway, let's get back on to some of the news, shall we? And the BBC say Sheffield United's takeover by an American consortium has been complete and will be officially announced imminently. The group, which is led by Stephen Rosen and Helmi Al-Tawki, said they had received full clearance from the EFL earlier this month. It will bring an end to Prince Abdullah's 5-year reign with the club. And this has gone on for a long time, Justin. It looked at one point like it might not happen. So thank Father Christmas that it's done.
Yeah, it's huge news for Sheffield United. I feel like we've been here before. I mean, it must have been like 4 or 5 weeks ago when we were discussing it.
Yeah, it's because, God, there's been so many different barriers where we've been like, okay, it looks like it's finally happening. And the fact that it's, I mean, talks have been happening since the summer, haven't they? I mean, we're now nearly at Christmas. They've finally only just got done. It's pretty mental, really.
It is. It's stressful buying a house. I imagine it's even more stressful buying a football club, and it's obviously going to take time. Though it is true, though. You pull a face, but it is true. It takes time.
Yeah. Just an interesting analogy. Carry on.
It took me 6 months. I'm not surprised it takes as long for a football club. if not longer. Um,
Did you have to pass a fair and proper test while purchasing your house?
do you know what I did?
Did you actually?
No.
Just in case you're trying to run the house into the ground.
Oh yeah, I would never do that. I'm trying to strip it of assets. I'm trying to put one analogy. Take all the copper out. But I think it's needed because Sheffield United, I do think, needs strengthening in January. Not because the squad's weak. I think the depth needs adding to. Absolutely. They've lost players to injury. They're picking up a couple of injuries now. It's a good time, and hopefully the new ownership does bring that. But also, there's been a lot of stress at the football club over the past couple of years because the ownership situation has been up in the air. And I think all this does is just ground everyone, which is brilliant.
Yeah, well, it's held back the club, hasn't it, Justin?
Yeah,
that's the ultimate thing here. It's one of the main reasons why they absolutely stunk out the Premier League last season because of the ownership issues and the fact that Sheffield United now sit top of the table with all this going on in the background and not having an interested owner at the club in the summer and still managing to pull off what they've done so far is ridiculous. So if they get this done before January, then it could be a very, very exciting month for Blades fans. What this does mean, Justin, is we'll have another set of American owners in the Championship. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it is interesting, isn't it? I was listening to 5 Live the other day and they had a football finance expert on there, and he reckons every club in the Premier League and EFL will have some sort of American investment in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, currently, by my count, 6 of the 24 Championship clubs are owned by Americans. Sheffield United will make it 7. So how many of them have some form of American investment is another thing, but it's probably a significant amount more than people would imagine. But it is interesting to see how many have come in over the past few years in particular, isn't it, Justin?
Yeah, Championship's the new Wild West, isn't it? But it is interesting. I do think some of that comes, extends from Wrexham's success with the documentary. The financial model with that is they're going to bring in a lot more money because of Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney through the documentary, and it's commercially it's paying off because they're partnerships, etc. And I think all that's done is light up the eyes of a lot of capitalists in America, hedge fund managers, etc., who will take a risk and invest, and they're seeing dollar signs with it. And not every club's going to end up like Wrexham. Not every club's going to end up like, trying to think of other successes with American owners.
Burnley have done pretty well since being taken over by their American owners, but it is interesting because it does seem quite a fashionable thing for American investors to do right now. But I do think it is a good thing for English football in general because it means we've got a lot of money heading to these shores, and that should only be seen as a good thing for the game, really. And it does also mean that we're starting to see, I think, more smart investors coming in as well, because you go back 10 years and we had several different owners coming in from non-American shores. And I mean, you look at Sheffield Wednesday, Reading, Birmingham, those kind of people coming in who didn't necessarily have the club at heart when it came to making their decisions. And, those clubs have suffered for those from those takeovers. Whereas now it seems like we've got more level-headed people coming in who are actually smart with their money, Justin.
Well, this is it with sort of hedge funds who do take over certain clubs. Burnley, for example, is a hedge fund. Leeds is another example because they're owned by a million different people. Like Jordan Spieth, golfer Jordan Spieth, and others. There are others.
Yeah, several different investors.
Yeah, and people want to see return on their investments, don't they? And that's why you've got to run a football club a little bit shrewdly, much more smartly. And that's why this, from a commercial point of view and financial point of view, does help things because clubs will stop hemorrhaging money, or they might try to stop hemorrhaging money. But I think everyone's after the nest egg or the golden egg of the Premier League and the TV money. That being said, I do think a lot of interest as well is coming from this heightened interest over in America in football generally. there's a lot more EFL coverage through CBS Sports Color. So in America, I think Wrexham's done a good job in getting eyes on EFL football in America. And I think people over here will be surprised to see or to know how much of an interest there is in America in football. It is continually growing. And when you've got that many people and that many rich people in America, you're bound to get people who want to get involved, a lot more than just watching, if you like.
Yeah, it is interesting. They probably think there's opportunities to, market these clubs in the States as well, and because there's more eyes on it, that can only be seen as a good thing for the Championship and the EFL as a whole. The only other thing I would mention is that all these American investors will probably look at it and go, we want to get to the, as you called it, the golden nest egg of the Premier League, Justin. There's only so many places in the Premier League, so doing it will be a lot more difficult than they think, and there's something definitely to keep in mind. But yeah, it's certainly fascinating to see that it is becoming more and more of a thing, isn't it? And probably will do as time goes on. So yeah, a fascinating trend. Let's talk about Luton Town, because the final plans for their new stadium have been given planning approval. Power Court will have a capacity of 25,000 and it's hoped will be built by 2027. We were just saying just how long it took for the Sheffield United takeover to happen. Bloody hell, this has taken years to happen, hasn't it? I remember it being discussed when I lived there. So it must have been about 10 years ago that this has been in the works. So thank God it finally looks like it's happening.
Bloody councils, eh?
Yeah.
Trying to get planning permission on anything.
I don't know if it is down to the council, just make that clear. But I don't know why it's been, I don't know what the exact reason is why it's taken this long, but it's good that it seems to finally be happening, even though it does probably mean Luton Town, Kenilworth Road is going to be disappearing from our eyes very soon, Justin.
Yeah, we've got 2 years left of Kenilworth Road, which is probably as much as anybody needs, really. It's a charming old stadium, but it's not a very nice match day experience. I've long said
I'm going there on Friday.
Yeah, there you go. You'll experience it firsthand. I've long said the anecdote that the away stand has a certain charm to it, walking through the gardens and the Oak Road stand, blah, blah, blah. Everyone knows the story. But I've got size 11 feet and my feet don't fit in the stand. Like they're over the edge. It's not very comfortable. I'm 6 foot. I'm not the tallest. I can't sit down. Shouldn't be sitting down at away games anyway. Yes, I know. But, I'm over 30 now. I want to sit down at half time. I can't. It's not very comfortable. And I think that's just a wider note and a nod to a more pleasant match day experience for everyone. I think a new stadium will actually release a lot more potential in the football club.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love Kenilworth Road. I've been there several times, even when I went to see them play Dorchester Town several years ago, Justin. So I'm fully aware of, how Kenilworth Road is certainly one of those stadiums which I love, but it probably does need replacing. So Power Court, I think it's well overdue now. And we've mentioned this before, the pictures look very impressive. So it'll be interesting to see what it's like when it's officially built. But it's good that Luton are finally moving on, because I think Kenilworth Road, in a way, has sort of been holding the club back in certain circumstances. So getting a bigger stadium is obviously a big thing for Luton. So it'd be sad to lose Kenilworth Road, but good to see their new stadium when it's finally built. Moving on, Justin, it's been revealed what Norwich captain Kenny McLean said after getting sent off against Middlesbrough back in October. So he was given an extra 1-game ban for his comments on top of the sending off for whatever. And an FA document has now revealed he approached the referee and said, "Use a fucking shite at your job, you useless fuck." It's not very nice, is it?
He's captain, isn't he? He does need to approach things a little bit differently as captain, with a little bit more maturity and maybe composure would be the word.
Yeah, it's not what you want from your captain, is it? Especially when he's getting plenty of suspensions for
it sounds funny in Scottish, though. It does sound funny in Scottish.
It does sound funny in Scottish. Everything sounds funnier in Scottish. It's like The Thick of It. You ever watched The Thick of It, Justin?
I've seen clips.
Yeah. Peter Capaldi, in that play Malcolm Tucker, just makes swearing cool. And it makes it a lot more funnier as well. But yeah, I mean, he shouldn't be saying stuff like this because for every reason that you just listed there, Justin. But it does remind me of a quote from, the Secret Footballer, one of his books. He was talking about referees, and he once said to a referee, "Ref, have you ever played the game before?" And the ref turned around to him and said, "Yeah, and I definitely wasn't shit as you have been today," which quickly shut him up. But I think referees need to start taking that approach a bit more. Have a bit of banter back,
I mean,
that's what I would say on the whole matter.
Can you banter being called shite at your job and then a useless fuck? No.
just got to be witty. You got to be on your toes, haven't you? Anyway, Justin, we'll finish off with Omar Reitz's Instagram. Of course, the Cardiff City manager. Have you seen it? His Instagram?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say firstly, it's quite rare for a manager to be on Instagram anyway, but his is very similar to a moody teenager. His most recent post is him posing for a selfie with a disgruntled look on his face. Don't know if that's got anything to do with the current situation at Cardiff, but we'll leave that there. The rest, mostly pictures of him as Cardiff manager, but there's no caption and there's some music playing across it. It's certainly very different to what you usually expect from a manager. I'll say that much, Justin.
It's not the fact that he's a manager that's the problem here. It's the fact that he's over 40 and doing it.
Very true. Very true. I think before the other pictures, I'd be like, yeah, fine. But when it's like the longing look at the camera in the most recent post, it's, yeah. You wouldn't expect that from someone over 40, but I quite like it. I think I want to see more stuff like this. I'm going to follow him, Justin. And like every post that we see from further on, I think all it's missing is some inspirational quotes, or I don't know, something along the lines of, those quotes that you see on posters in a tea shop or something like that. If you're having a bad day, insert Prosecco here or something like that. You know what I mean? You don't have to be mad to work here, but it certainly helps.
That is the most apt quote you can have for Cardiff City.
Just stuff like that. That would, I think, really add to the mystique of Omar Reitz's Instagram, I reckon.
Yeah, it certainly is mystique. But as I say, it's the fact that he's over 40 and doing it. What he should be doing is posting pictures of his dog on a dog walk and just being like, a bit windy today. Like my dad's Instagram's perfect. Like he just gives me weather updates, and he's got a new bird, and he's doing the Addams Family theme tune. That's
how
what
would
people
you
over
like
40
it
should
if
be doing.
he started doing selfies like Omar Reitz is doing?
I would have a conversation with him.
So there you have it. Justin's synopsis of this whole thing is that someone needs to take Omar Reitz aside and just say, Omar, come on, mate. remember your age. That's what we're trying to say.
Cardiff's driven him that mad.
Yeah. Anyway, ladies and gents, this has been the Second Tier Midweek Show, and it's been a news roundup of everything cracking off across the Championship from the past few days. We'll, of course, be back tomorrow with the preview show brought to you by SBK, so we look forward to seeing you then for that. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.